for tuning in to Hacks and Hobbies with your host, Junaid. In Season 2 of Hacks and Hobbies, we're visited by our amazing guests coming from all walks of life. Want to learn their story, their struggles, and their journey on how they got to where they are today. So stick around. In this episode, we're getting to talk with Fuad Kamal. He's been cycling for a lot longer than I have. I cycled and biked back when I was younger. Then I got back into biking as a mountain biker, and then I got into biking as cycling. So, Fuad, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, Fuad, I know we've met a few years ago through the cycling team, and our mutual passion for video and photography had, brought us closer together. And then we've been talking back and forth about writing books, collaborating on many different projects, and they've been really awesome. But I wanted to tap into your expertise into cycling. And
okay, what expertise? I'm not sure what you're talking about, man. You got the wrong. Are you sure you signed up like the right person for today's episode?
You still have a lot more experience than I do. And if not, then, this will be still an awesome conversation.
Sure.
About, what we learned about, cycling and the different things that we've been experimenting in the past few years.
Okay.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and, tell us your experience in the cycling and how you got into it.
Okay, sure. So my name is Fuad Kamal. I am an independent consultant. I do mobile architecture and development and strategy. I'm involved in right now 3 books concurrently, which is like interesting. I thought one book was a lot of work, and somehow I got involved in 3. And they're all technical books. I'm into writing, obviously, cycling, martial arts. Actually, cycling is just like, for me, more of an augmentation to my martial arts. It helps with the cardio. And it's a way of getting around, or it was for many years for me, just a way of getting around, especially when I was in college.
So tell us a little bit about how you got into cycling and, why was it so important for you to do cycling over anything else? And, your little journey in the cycling industry. I know.
Sure. Go ahead.
It's an augmentation and it helps. It's a really good point that you mentioned that it's really for the cardio that it brings, because you have to be cardiologically super, it helps with your heart, it helps with your lungs and breathing and everything. It's a really awesome way to be active as well. But I think you had experience with cycling a lot earlier before you use it for this specific purpose.
Yeah, actually, yeah. The whole cardio thing, that sounds like clinical and scientific, but actually the reality is, my dad got me like a Steel like Kmart bike when I was 7 years old. And for me, that opened up, many doors. It was a source of freedom. And I don't mean to like wax philosophical on you, but really, like, it meant I could go places where I couldn't have gone otherwise. I had friends also who had bikes, and we would go like we didn't have like malls that were accessible back then. But there was like not a hospital, but like a clinical outpatient type center, and they had like a pharmacy, and we would have like candies, in the pharmacy. So we would bike there and, spend whatever like few cents we had on candy and stuff. And I wound up exploring like not just a neighborhood, but beyond, and like, forests and fields of like different things. We went and exploring. It was like an adventure. We went all kinds of places we would never got to on foot. So that was the main thing originally. It was a source of freedom. And, I was a big time introvert growing up all the way through until I got to college. College I became more extroverted, but all the way until college I was very introverted. So for me, like cycling, you just feel good for one thing. Like not only does it give you freedom, but you get this exhilaration from when I'm on the bike. I just feel amazing. I don't know how to describe it. Even now, like if I need to think about something, like I find that's a really good time. It's like you're right up running through the countryside. It's very peaceful. And I wound up pushing myself physically harder than like without thinking about it. I just pushed myself really hard. In fact, one of the reasons I started riding indoors is because I can't maintain that control of like staying within a certain zone. And we can get into that later, but like, I can't do structured training outside, because when I'm outside, it's really hard not to just max out and just go. But yeah, so I mean, I had that. So that Kmart part I had since I was 7, all the way until and through college. So I got to college, and that still was the bike I was riding. And in college, that was my car. Like I got around everywhere. I went to work, I went to classes, I zipped around campus everywhere in that steel bike. And it was great. And then I got hit by cars in college like twice. So first time it was like raining, and this guy, he was on a I went to school in Southern Illinois in Champaign, Urbana. So it's like 2.5 hours south of Chicago. So like a lot of the students there are from the Chicago and Atlanta area, so they would all go home on the weekend. Basically, it's like everyone would be driving home. So this guy was going back to Chicago, and he didn't see me, and it was raining. I saw him, but I had a walk sign, and I was riding through the intersection, and I hit my brakes, and it was this cheap Kmart bike, so my bike didn't stop, and he didn't stop, so he just made a turn, and he went through me, and basically like my body was rubbing against his bike, against his car, and then I went up on the ground, and he kept going. He didn't stop. And then like whatever, he kept going, and then like a ways down, like I saw the brake lights go on, and he's like, I guess he realized like, he might just go to jail for like it. Yeah. So then he came back, and he's like apologetic and stuff, and I got his like driver's license information, all that, and then he went home, and I called the police, and I made a report, and then apparently the police or the court made him come back to Urbana like that weekend, and so he was really upset that I called the police, and so he said, I'm going to sue you. You can talk to my lawyer. I'm like, what? You hit me with your car and you're going to sue me? So that was my first accident. And then it was not a big deal. Like I didn't get hurt, and I had my wheel trued for like $20 or something, and my bike was good to go. And I kept riding my Kmart bike. And then another time, this guy had come all the way from South America just to hit me with his car. I mean, what really happened is he had a brother who was doing his doctorate in physics, and so he was looking for the physics lab. It's called Loomis Lab. And there's a bike path that cuts right in front of the driveway for Loomis Lab. There's a very small parking lot there. But he was looking for the sign. He saw it. And so as soon as he saw the sign, he swerved into the driveway, but he didn't realize there was a guy, me, riding my bike at top speed, through that, over that driveway on the bike path. So he just like literally went through my bike, like head on collision. He hit me on the side, but like he hit my bike full force.
Oh man.
So, but luckily for me, so like I said, I'm into martial arts, and I got into martial arts, I guess, sophomore year. Like I had a roommate who I wanted to always do martial arts, like since I was really young. I always got picked on. I was the subject of being bullied in grade school, and I'd always beg my dad, like, can you put me in karate school? Can you put me in martial arts? But like, typical, like, I guess they see like Indo-Pac parents are like, oh, it's a waste of money. Like you don't need that. So he never did. And then I got to college thinking, martial arts is so expensive. And I had met some friends, and they were like, I saw he was wearing like the screen belt, and, he had a martial arts uniform. I was like, oh, what are you doing? This is Taekwondo. Oh, how much does that cost? It's like, oh, it's like $30 a year. It's like, what? $30 a year? Like, what are you talking about? So I'm like, sign me up. Like, where do I go? So like, I got involved in Taekwondo, initially in Taekwondo. And then I met my ninjutsu teacher in that class. And that's another story. But like, basically I had been doing, like, once I got involved in martial arts in college, like that became like a major occupation for me. Like I was more involved in that than in my studies, fortunately or unfortunately. So like I wound up training like every day, like either Taekwondo or ninjutsu, or sometimes both in the same day. So like Taekwondo was like 3 days a week, and then ninjutsu, like my teacher would come over at night, and we'd go out like stealth mode on the campus and like train out in the campus like almost every night. Sometimes he would sneak into my room with a sword and like, put it to my throat to try and like get me aware to wake up, but I never would. I just speak like he would, like, actually one time he came in my room, like he would climb, we were on the second floor, so he would sneak up into our second floor apartment. He would break in and he'd put a sword to my throat, and like I wouldn't wake up. Then he's like, Fuad. I still didn't wake up, and he's like shaking me like physically, and I'm like, what? I wouldn't wake up. He's like, dude, you're dead like 70 times over. I'm like, yeah, sorry, I'm a heavy sleeper. What can I say? So anyway, this guy who was training me in ninjutsu, like, we had, for 1 month prior to the second accident, we had been breaking into the what is it called? The armory on campus. It's this huge, like, long building with a really high, like, arch ceiling. And they had a pole vault mat set up in there. So they have like track events and other stuff in there, but they had this pole vault mat set up. So we would break in at night when nobody's there, and we would do full body throws on the pole vault mat. Cause on regular mats, you can like roll and you can tumble and you can do some throws, but when you're doing full body throw, that means like you're throwing someone over your head, like through the air.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so you need something like a pole vault mat to land on, so you don't like break your
bigger padding.
Yeah. So anyway, we were practicing that for like every night for 30 days, like almost a month. And then this guy came and hit me with his car. So when he hit me with his car, like my body just reacted. Like your muscles, like they get this training, like muscle memory. So like I didn't even think about it. Like 1 second, this guy is hitting me with his car. The next thing I knew, I'm flying through the air. My knees just tucked into my chest. I just flipped off the bike. I somersaulted through the air, hit the ground, rolled, and stood up. And this happened so fast. I didn't understand what happened. I was just like, this guy just hit my bike. And I'm like, dude, my bike, what did you do? And he's freaked out. He jumps out of the car. He's like, oh my God, are you okay? Let me take you to the hospital. Like he was amazed to see me standing. And I was like, dude, you hit my bike. Let's go to a bike shop. It's like, no. Let me take you to the hospital. I'm like, no, man, you're going with me right now to the bike shop. You like damaged my bike. And he's like, no, like you have to go to the hospital. I'm like, no, we're going to the bike shop. I know where there's a bike shop nearby. And for a while, so there was this Bianchi shop, like walking distance behind Loomis Lab. And I've checked, it's not there anymore, unfortunately. But like I had been going there for like months with my roommate, like just, window shopping and like drooling over the Bianchis in the window. And we talked to him, but like I couldn't afford those bikes. It's like, I think the cheapest one was like $300. I mean, $300 back then was like a lot of money, especially for a student, so like I did not have the money for that. So I'm like, let's go to the bike shop. So I made him, like, insisted. So he parked his car and I made him walk with me to the Bianchi shop. And as soon as I walk in the door, the owner sees me. He knows me. He's like, what the hell happened to you? Like, I didn't think anything. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? He's like he could tell I've been hit by a car. I don't know how, but
he could tell.
I mean, I wasn't like bleeding or anything. I think I had a scratch on my knee, but that was it. And that was from rolling on the ground. It wasn't from the car. The car never actually touched me, right? It just went through the bike. The guy wasn't on it when it hit. And so I'm like, hey, can you like true my wheel? Can you fix my bike? And he's like, he almost broke out laughing. He's like, dude, your frame is bent. Like, what's wrong with you? there's no way. Like, so he's like, I'm like, okay, so how much do you think my bike is worth? And now the shop owner knew me, right? So he's like, oh, $100. Like, remember this bike, like when I was 7 years old, was $100 brand new in Kmart, right? So it wasn't worth anything. It was like, he knew I was going to buy a bike from him. So he's like, yeah, $100. So the guy was just so happy to like, get out of going to jail and, all that. So he took out $100 cash and just paid me on the spot. And I was really happy. I was like, oh, wow, I got cash for my bike. And, now maybe I can save up some more money and get a Bianchi. And I did, like, I saved up for a few more months and until I had like enough money to get this Bianchi, what's it called? Main Street. It was a like red Main Street. And this bike, man, like I took it for a test ride and remember I had a steel bike from Kmart. So that thing was heavy and I never realized how heavy it was. And this bike was chromoly, which to me now feels heavy, but that bike then it was like riding a feather. And I took that for a test ride and I like flew off curbs, like really high curbs. I was like, I don't know. I was like flying everywhere, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And then I came back like a few days later and I was like, hey, that bike I test rode? I really want to buy that bike. And there was a mechanic there. It wasn't the owner. And he's like, you can't have it right now. I'm like, why? It's like, they're truing the wheels and stuff. Like, from your test ride.
That's right. You messed up the wheel.
So I was like, oops. But I wound up getting that bike. And then I rode that. That was my car. Like, and I rode that bike all the way through college, through getting married. And like, until now, I still have that bike.
Nice. Yeah, I don't have any stories like that because growing up, I had bikes too, right? But I had like a banana seat bike. I think that one had training wheels. Then I had a BMX for some time. And then I think the last bike that I had back in Saudi was a mountain bike. I think it was a 24-inch. But every single bike that I owned was stolen at one point or another. Because I was growing up in Saudi Arabia and I never had locks. So wherever I would go, but like, I'm just going to leave the bike here, go in here, shop, and then come back out. But then like sometimes it would be there, the bike would be there. But other times I'd be walking back home.
You didn't learn your lesson after like the first couple of times?
Not that I didn't learn a lesson. I didn't know any better. Like my dad would have, gotten me a lock or something, but he never did.
Right.
Maybe he did. I just have a really bad memory. So So, Dad, if you ever get a chance to listen to this podcast, I'm not blaming it on you. It's my fault. All right. So that's
Yeah, I had a banana seat bike too, man. Actually, that was before the steel bike, the road bike that got totaled in college. My dad, we had gone to. I'd been asking for a bike for a long time, and my dad took me to a garage sale, and we got this banana seat bike for $10. And it actually, like, I test rode it, and I couldn't get it to brake. You know, when you pedal backwards to make the bike stop, it had that kind of brake. I forget what that's called, but like, I couldn't get it to stop, and so I'm like, this bike, the brakes don't work. And the kid who owned it, he was this really big, like really fat, heavyset kid, right? So he had a lot of weight, like maybe 5 times my weight. And he's like, no, it works fine. And he got up on it and he rode down the driveway and he like slammed down on the pedal backwards. And, you know, he has all this weight. So he skidded the wheel. And I was like, oh, I guess it does work. I don't know what's wrong with me. But that was my banana seat bike until I got the new Kmart bike. Yeah.
That's too funny. So one of the things that I started, I was talking to my cousin, and he's like, you know, you have this experience with cycling and whatnot. And I had a few people reach out to me about, hey, I'm looking to buy a bike. What should I go and get? And my sister did the same thing like a few years ago. And my cousin just did that recently. And 2 of my other cousins, they also bought bikes. And so my brother-in-law was like, you know, you should totally do an episode of how to pick how to pick a bike and what to look for in a bike. I was like, you know, that's not a bad idea. So I recorded an episode where I talk about the different types of bicycles. And I was like, you know, there's road bikes, there's mountain bikes, and then there's probably stunt bikes, which are like BMX, but
hybrids.
Now that they're hybrids, exactly. So now that I look it up, they're like, well, there's really just 2 types of main bikes, or maybe. So I was like, you know, I don't know too much. I'll have to do some research. So I was like, let me talk to some of my cyclist friends, and you know, you're the first one to talk a little bit about, you know, what you need to look for when you're getting a bicycle.
Yeah, I mean, really, it boils down to what do you want to do with it, right? And what are you interested in? And I would say, like, I wish I had learned this lesson earlier in life, but I realize now some people, like, they might have a lot of money, like they might be wealthy, but they don't just go out and buy like the top thing necessarily. Like this guy, he just bought a telescope for me today.
Yeah.
And like I had listed on Craigslist for like $100, and I got it for free. But like, you know, his daughter was interested in telescopes, and like some of the scopes he was looking at were like, you know, $2,000 or more, right? But he didn't just go out. I mean, you know, he was obviously wealthy, had a really nice car and all this, but he didn't go out and buy the top scope. He's like, let me make sure that she's interested in this thing first, and see if if she's going to stick with it, and then I'll get her a nicer one, right? So he went and picked up this $100 one from me. So I'd say, like, you know, before you go out and like go crazy, like get something cheap and affordable, and also think about like, what do you want to do? Like, do you want to ride indoors? Do you want to ride outdoors? What type of, do you like riding in the dirt? Do you like riding on the road? Are you scared of riding on the road? Because if you are, maybe you don't need a road bike if you're going to be riding on bike paths. Because I know a lot a people, even my own kids, like, or some of my daughters, like, initially they're like, oh, I don't want to ride on the road. I'm like, no, I'll go with you. And they get used to it. But initially it's a scary thing because there's cars on the road, right? Yeah. And that can definitely be dangerous. So that's something to think about. And then I'd say before you even spend any money, like, figure out in your head mentally, what do you think you want to do?
Yeah.
And then go to bike shops and try the different bikes, because the way they fit and the way they feel is totally different.
Totally.
And I would try, like, I'd say, like, go to a shop that has an actual fitter or someone who knows what they're doing. Because there's lots of bike shops that, like, look at you like, oh, yeah, and then just stick you on a bike. But, you know, the handlebars being, like, too far forward, the seat not being the right height can make a big difference in how comfortable or uncomfortable something feels initially, especially if you're not used to riding bikes. Exactly. But I'd say, yeah, definitely go to some bike shops. And another thing is, there's these things, especially with mountain bikes, they do this, but I think they do with other bikes too, is they have these days where they'll have like what is it called? Like, they have, like, they'll go to a park and they'll set up like all these bikes, and you can do test rides. So like there's one here in Rockville where they've done where, like, they had, I forget the brand, but there'll be some brand of bike they'll come out, and they'll have like a whole bunch, like 100 or something bikes, and people just take it out for like 30 minutes, and there's like a mountain bike trail right there, and they go and ride on it, and they can do a test and really see what the bike is doing. Like, if you just go to a bike shop and it's not by a trail, and you know, if you're doing like a mountain bike, how do you know what it really feels like? And I'd say, like, the next thing is, like, talk to people who are into that sport, like whether it's road biking or mountain biking, because they're very different. Like, if you ask me about mountain bikes, man, like, they have, like, things have changed a lot since we were kids, right? Like, now the shocks or have adjustable pressure. I'm like,
Mm.
I don't even know where to start with that, right? Like,
There's no.
or why, right? So I mean, you know, I would like go riding with some people, and then like another thing I would advise is like, you know, same thing like if you're into photography, right? Which is so another thing I'm into. Is like I do like some professional shooting,
Yeah.
but like if you are interested in a lens or a certain camera, like don't just go out and buy. It's just too expensive, right? Like a camera body can cost $2,500 or more, and some of these lenses cost, I mean,
A lot.
$5,000 or more for one lens.
Yes.
So the much easier thing to do is like spend $100 and rent one.
Yeah.
Right. And nowadays, I mean, I don't know, I don't recall this ever being a thing when I was young, but now like so many bike shops, just call up a bike shop, say, hey, do you do bike rentals?
Mm-hmm.
Or look online and you'll find lots of places that rent bikes. Like we went to one of my daughters to Tucson.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I didn't want to ship my bikes there. So we just rented a couple bikes. Me and my daughter went riding every morning, you know, at dawn because it was really cheap just to rent some cheapo bikes and get a feel for it. And so you can try different brands that way. Another thing you can do is like a bike shop, if they're interested in selling you a bike, a lot of times they'll do a loan. Like they'll give you the bike overnight. Some car dealerships will do this. Tesla will do this, but like they'll just give you the car for overnight. Some bike shops will do the same thing. Like here, take the bike, ride it around, and bring it back. I mean, what are you gonna do? Steal it? They know, you know, you take your information. So
exactly,
you know, it's not a big deal. But I'd say definitely like try everything. Like try a hybrid, try a road bike, try a cyclocross bike, because they all have very different fits and feels. So like, and go for some group rides and see what it, you know, what are you interested in? Because maybe you think you want to do road biking and you find out that, you know what, that position isn't comfortable for you.
Yeah.
And then even within road bikes, like there's like bikes designed for racing that are very aggressive and they're not so comfortable, and there are bikes that are just meant for casual riding and they're much more comfortable. So it really depends on you.
No, those are really excellent points, because, and I wish I had that information when I was getting into biking, right? Because since my last experience with a bicycle when I was 18, 19 years old was with a mountain bike. When I came to the States, I was like, okay, I need to get a mountain bike because that's my last experience. I never thought about, you know, okay, I should go check out every single bike or the different types of bikes that are available and see how they feel. Like I like the thought didn't even cross my mind. And so when I did get my first bicycle, it was a mountain bike, and I knew my brother-in-law was into biking, so I started talking to him, and he's like, "Okay, if you're not going to spend, if you want to spend under $1,000, do not get a full suspension bike. Just get a hardtail." But then even he didn't tell me, "All right, go try all the different types of bikes that are available. Go to a bike shop." But you know what you're telling is you got to try it out before you even spend the money into the type of bike you want to get. Yeah. So what's funny is that. So I got the mountain biking. I rode the mountain bike, and most of the riding that I did on that mountain bike was on the road, because a couple of times I did go off-roading. And the first time ever I did that it was like a night ride. And I'm telling my buddies, like, dude, I just want to ride my bike on the regular trail in the daylight. So anyways, I ended up poking my eye on the way back because it was dark. I couldn't see what's going on, and I'm sweating at the same time, and it was like first time riding, and like I have no fitness whatsoever. It was hilarious. And then I would ride around the circle with my friend, colleague, and he had a road bike. And so I was like, all right, I don't want to spend more money, so I'm just going to get hybrid wheels for my mountain bike.
Okay.
And it's still heavy, right? I'm still working hard. So then it was until like later here in Virginia, my sister was like, oh, I'm going to this biking event up in New York where it's a 40-mile across the 5 boroughs. It's an event to, you know, raise awareness or something. So I ended up renting this bike. It was a GT road bike, and it was super light. And I got really lucky because they didn't have any steel bikes in my size. So the owner of the shop, and it was a small shop, was like, you know, I'll let you ride my bike. And it had, you know, super light. It had, you know, Shimano 105s, and like, I was like, whoa.
This was a road bike?
It was a road bike. Yeah. It was a road bike, and it felt really good. And even though my fitness level was like really low, I still felt great riding it. And even though it rained, like the whole time that I was riding the bike it was raining, you know, on and off. And so we were all wet. but I still had an excellent experience on this road bike. So very, very important that you test what you want to get into.
Yeah, and I mean, sorry to go off on a tangent, but like you mentioned, you went to this event to raise awareness about something. So it's funny that the point was to raise awareness, but you can't remember what it was about. Like,
Exactly.
like what an oxymoron.
Yep.
But you remember the bike though.
I remember the bike because, you know, it was like, oh, that was my main attraction. It's the bike ride.
Right.
You know, you all are riding together.
And coincidentally, like the same kind of thing happened to me. I was riding my Bianchi still, like all the way through, you know, after getting married and as an adult and, you know, an old guy. And I have a friend, he's actually a filmmaker from New York. His name's Omar Malik. You might have heard of him.
Yep.
But he like also was really into cycling, like for a long time in college as well. Like he used to always say, oh yeah, I rode with these like hardcore like guys until like my kidneys bled. Like he always goes back to that, like, you know, how this endurance of like running. But he had like a couple of road bikes. One of them was like a US Postal, you know, the ones they used to race, the US Postal Service one.
Okay.
So he had a nice bike, but like he's like, we should go biking sometime. I'm like, yeah, let's do it, right?
Yeah.
But I had my Bianchi and I had no concept like road bike versus hybrid, right? So like, you know, I had good fitness, but you know, because I was biking everywhere all the time, right? I would riding 10 miles no problem on my hybrid, and I never occurred to me until I did it that 10 miles and 20 miles, there's no difference. Like if you can do 10 miles, you can do 20 miles. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But anyway, so like we went for a bike ride together, and you know, I'll preface it with saying he never rode with me again after that. But like I tried so hard to keep up with him, and like especially the downhills, like he would just go, you know, he tried to stay with me, but in a hybrid, you just can't keep up with the road bike. There's just the dynamic. It doesn't matter if you're more fit than another guy.
Exactly.
The bike makes a huge difference in what you can do with it, and depending on what you're trying to do with it. So I definitely say, like, you know, make sure you're getting the right bike for what you want to do. Like, don't get a hybrid if you want to stay on the road, because you'll enjoy more. You'll enjoy going, at least I do. I enjoy going fast. So, you know, get a fast bike, get a road bike for that. But again, like you can also save money. Like if you don't, you know, you can get a carbon bike, but you can get the same type of bike, but aluminum, and it doesn't weigh that much more. Yeah. It might feel a little bit different, but you'll pay a lot less money, like half the money. So
exactly,
you know, those are things to keep in mind. And you can always sell your bike and get another bike later if you get that passionate about it. So
yeah, man. And so when I got into road biking, so when my sister told me, okay, we're going to do this event, I immediately went online and started looking for the cheapest bike that I can find. And I ended up buying this one bike and it was a TT bike. It was a time trial bike, and I got it for like $800. And I was like, all right, this is so cool. And then I sit on it and I lock my feet in, and I think I fell like a couple times on this bike. I'm like, okay, this bike is not going with me. And that's when I ended up renting the bike up there in New York. Then luckily, the bike store that I bought the bike from, it had a 365-day return policy, Jensen USA. So I ended up sending the bike back. And then I was like, all right, I need to get a road bike that's going to do what I want, you know, that's going to take me into the sport. And I think there was a sale going on this website anyways. I ended up getting this bike, and I had very little idea of what I was getting into. But after some research, I ended up getting a good bike that you know, that's sticking around with me for some time now. And then the other important part, once you do get the bike that you want to get, and if it's road bike or mountain bike, you got to make sure that it fits right.
Yeah, get a professional fit. Spend the money and get a professional fit.
And a lot of the times, the professional fit, it's going to be almost, well, it's not going to be almost as expensive as the bike that you've purchased. But especially if you're buying a bike that's $400, you're going to spend around the same amount of money in getting a professional bike fit, because if you and the bike are not in sync, right, it's not going, you know, you're not going to be comfortable.
Yeah, totally. Like, and there's small things, like little tiny adjustments, like the angle of the seat, the height of the seat. If that's not tweaked just right, like as you get more passionate about riding, you're going to wind up stopping because maybe you'll have knee issues, or you'll get saddle sores, or you'll have back pain. There's like all these common issues that crop up. Just a small, tiny little adjustment can fix that. But, you know, unless you're experienced, you know, it's really hard to diagnose that. But a fitter, that's his job. That's what he does. And I mean, the cheapest fit you can get usually is like $80-100. But if you get like a real, like if you go all out and get like a computer, you know, like laser, all that thing, where it's like totally as street as can be, you're still gonna spend more than $300. So like somewhere between $100 to $300 is what you're gonna spend for a pro fit. And I mean, like you're talking like people who race and stuff, and they're getting like the high end fits. You're still spending like at the top end $300, and those top end ones isn't a one time thing. Like you go there, you get the fit, you go and ride, and you go back, and they'll keep tweaking it for free. They won't like charge you every time you go back.
Charge you over, yeah. You basically have like 6 or 8 months, I think, time period where you can keep going back.
Yeah, it depends on the fitter, but I mean,
yeah, exactly. You can find all this information online, of course.
Yeah.
But then you would be doing a lot of research. Connect with people, right? Connect with people that you want to hang out with, that you're going to ride your bike with,
and say like you're an introvert or whatever, and you don't have any friends. Suppose, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure most people have some friends, but you don't know anyone who bikes, right? It doesn't matter. Like, find your local bike shop. Most bike shops have rides, group rides, and they have rides at different levels. So go with a beginner ride that they're going slower. But the fact that you start going rides, the biking community, most everywhere is people are very friendly and they're very helpful. So like, they might just see something and it's like, be helpfully like, oh, you could do this, or you could, and they will help you improve and learn. A lot of them, they'll have like clinics on how to change a tire. Like if you bike for any amount of time, you're going to wind up getting a flat at some point. So sometimes they're free. Like they'll just teach you different mechanical skills and how to maintain your bike and keep it performing well.
Cool, man. That was really informative. We'll definitely do another session and talk more about, the different types of training you could do and what the different training does for you physically and mentally, and, where you got to be at. But again, the first step is to figure out what is your reason for riding a bicycle.
Definitely.
All right. Some questions that I always ask my guests. I know this is a special episode, but what is one hobby that you wish you got into?
That I wish I got into that I didn't?
Yeah, yes, you didn't.
So I kind of wish I had learned to shoot better or more. Like I went skeet shooting once, and I went to a range one time and shot like a 45. But like that's something I wish I had more time for, and something I would still like to get into. I kind of regret. You just wanted one, right?
All right. I mean, you can talk about multiple ones.
Well, I mean, another thing, like I used to ski when I was 7. Me and my dad and our family used to go skiing, but that kind of just dropped off, and it wasn't real skiing. Like we lived in Chicago, so we went to Wisconsin. So it's a kind of the tallest black diamond part of our slope, what they call it. It's like probably a bunny slope in Colorado. So it would be cool to like go, some real skiing, some real downhill skiing.
Yeah. I have the same feeling about skiing, snowboarding, because I got into snowboarding back in 2005. I probably snowboarded for like 6-7 years till I moved to Colorado, and then I didn't really go snowboarding. And I kick myself even now. Like I never went snowboarding.
You moved to Colorado and you stopped? Snowboarding makes no sense. you moved to the place where it's the best snowboarding in the world.
Best snow in the world, and I didn't go snowboarding at all in Colorado, and I still kick myself on it. So that I wish I was able to go back and do some snowboarding, but my knees are in the shape right now to get back into it. All right. Next question. What is your favorite movie or TV show? And if none, how about a book?
Oh, wow. I don't know. So for me, movies and TV shows are mainly like just time fillers. Like, like when you're really tired and you don't have, your brain can't work anymore, but you don't want to sleep quite yet. And probably it's an excuse. So I don't know about, I guess a movie for sure. Like, I grew up on Star Wars. Who else my age hasn't, right? So like, I remember seeing the original Star Wars movie in the theaters.
Nice.
The stuff that was going on in my life, it was like a really big deal. Like I went and saw it with some friends when I was with my mom, and my parents were divorced. And then my dad actually had custody. So like he had like basically spent his life savings like hiring private detectives trying to find me because my mom had run off with us. And then so after I got back and my dad had me, he took me to see Star Wars. So it was my second time seeing it, but again, it was like kind of like this meaningful thing. And then for me, the movie was like really, it changed our whole culture, right? Like not just.
It did, yeah.
So I guess Star Wars is probably my favorite movie. Yeah.
Is that why you got into ninjutsu?
No, not at all. I got into ninjutsu because I was beat up almost every single day as a kid, like growing up. So, like I said, like I kind of alluded to earlier, like I had been asking and begging my dad, like, can you please put me in martial arts school? Because going to school for me meant I was going to get beat up. Okay. And
Man.
to the point where like, like kids used to play marbles back then. I don't know what they do now. Like maybe they all like have iPhone games or switches and stuff. But
Yeah.
back then we would do like physical things like play marbles or play basketball. So, like I would like be walking home from school one day and like I had a bag with the marbles and the marble I won. And some kid, I mean, now I realize as an adult, like, these kids had like family issues and they had reasons why. Like,
Oh yeah.
but I mean, then all I knew is this kid comes and like, he like pushes me down to the ground and he rips my bag of marbles open and, he punches me, and I'm like, so, I mean, I would just get beat up all the time. But at the same time, like, I wasn't a pushover, right? Like, I wasn't like, I was what we call like in martial arts now. I didn't know what it was then, but we call it indomitable spirit, right? So like I had kids, like there was this circle of bullies, like literally they had like a gang, right? Like and they were like the head bully, and then they're like his subordinate bullies, right? And like I actually went like in reading class, and like maybe we had picked on me or something. I'm like, I challenged this head bully to a fight. I'm like, come on, in the playground, let's go, like let's duke it out. And he's like kind of shocked. He's like, you're asking me to fight you? And I'm like, he's like, no, you have to fight my attendants first. I'm like, no, I want to fight you. Come on, what are you scared? And so like even though I was picked on every day, I was like kind of like, no, I'm not taking this from you. I don't care if you beat me up, right? And I had no training, and I didn't know this kid had been taking karate in his life, right? So like we got to the playground, and like he put me in some headlock until like I was crying, like not because I was like crying because I was sad or anything, but like because like literally like the tears were being forced out of my face, like and so but like I wouldn't give up. It's like. And he's like, he didn't know what to do. It's like, do you give up? Like, no. It's like, do you give up? I'm like, no. It's like, he didn't know what to do. It's like, I'm putting this kid in a headlock. He's like, he's like got tears coming out of his face, but he's not giving up. I don't know what to do. So like it went on so long. Finally, the crossing guard or the playground guard saw us, and she made him sit on the bench, which is punishment. So he got in trouble, and I was scot free, even though I picked the fight. Right? But I mean, I had this attitude, but I didn't have any training and I didn't have any access to it. So again, like when I got to college and I was like, wow, I can get into martial arts and it doesn't cost hardly anything. And I was like, that's it. I'm done. This is it. So I had, when I was, again, I was an introvert and I was into reading a lot. Like I was really into reading. Like I didn't have a lot of friends. I had like one friend in grade school and I had like one friend in high school, and not even close friends. Right. But I did a lot of reading, and that was my world. Like to get away from everything, I would absorb myself in books. Right. And that's why if you ask me like, what's your favorite book, it's really a hard question. Cause like I literally read like pretty much every book in the library, in the public library, in the school library. Like I just read everything. But especially fiction and fantasy and all that. I went off on a tangent and I forgot where I was. So you asked me about ninjutsu, right? So like I had gone into the school library and I looked up every book on martial arts. So there's a book on judo and all this, and I'd be like in my room doing like practicing roles and whatever I could read out of a book, My parents like, what's going on up there, right? But of course, you can't get training from a book, like not in martial arts. That's not how it works. But I did what I could, right? But I had, read like there's a guy named Stephen Hayes. Like later on, like my ninjutsu teacher found out like he actually trained with him, and he was training with him while I was there. And my brother later on trained with him. But like he had written all these books. He was like the first American to go to Japan and learn ninjutsu like from the source and this and that. And like there's lots of challenges of like how authentic is any of this or that, and because like Japan, there's a particular thing with martial arts in Japan that like the way like like with what we do in Quran and like with what we call sana, like lineage, like there's an art and they have a lineage and they can trace their teachers back to like the guy who started it, right? Like so Aikido, like they know who founded it, and then you can trace like any Aikido teacher, like this is his teacher and this is his teacher all the way back to the founder of Aikido, right? So like that's how martial arts work in Japan. Like it's a very official thing and it's a very sanctioned thing. Ninjutsu is the opposite of that, right? First of all, like the way it came about, like it was eventually made illegal. It was banned by the shogun, or by the emperor, right? Like because they were so effective. But like in ninjutsu, there is no real lineage. So like everything from Hatsume, who's like the current like founder and head of that art, like all his stuff is like suspect. Like you can't whoever he says his teachers are, you can't really verify that. Versus like
hybrid.
It's all, and that's what it's about. It's all like, it's just like, it was the original mixed martial arts. Like what they did is they went to all the different martial arts schools and they learned everything and they took what they liked and what was effective and what worked for them. And they kept that and they threw out everything else. And so it was a very much like a renegade type of art.
That's really interesting. The one thing that we talk about is beekeeping and how, if you say, what kind of bees do you have here in the US? Well, we have mutts, which are mixed bees. They've been bred between carnelians, Italian bees, Russian bees, and there's another one, not African. So they've been like we cannot trace back to any species. So they're basically American bees now. It's really interesting because honeybees are not local. They're immigrants in the Americas. The local bees, the native bees that help pollinate the plants and trees over here are bees like bumblebees and carpenter bees and mason bees, as well as the other pollinators such as the yellow jackets and the other hornets. It's really cool.
So honeybees don't pollinate plants?
They do pollinate plants, but they're not native to United States.
So that means the Native Americans didn't have honey, huh? Is that right?
Yeah, they probably didn't. That's probably
true. So I said, no wonder Pooh Bear is British. Okay, that makes sense now.
Well, that's a totally different controversy because bears do not eat honey. They eat the larva, the protein. They want the protein. Yeah.
That's why bees are people. Okay. Never mind. Way off a total tangent.
No problem. So what is your favorite superhero?
Okay, so I was really into Spider-Man, but I don't know if that's because those happen to be the comics I happen to collect because I got into it at a certain point, and so I just kept collecting that. But I would go to one of my friend's house, and he had X-Men, so I really loved that. So Wolverine was I guess one of my favorite characters of all time because he had the knives coming out of his hands, man. I mean, what's more cool than that? And especially with the whole ninjutsu slant, that's the ultimate. The weapons are part of your body, right? So and then when he they did backstory on him, he actually trained with in Japan and all that, and he had that was just too cool. I mean, for me, I guess Wolverine was probably.
There's a lot of connections there.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, if you were a board game, what would it be?
Oh, I try to be more interesting.
Very nice answer, but board game,
I mean, I was just doing a pun there, BORED.
That's a good one.
I don't know. Okay, so that's hard. Does it have to be a board game? Because I was really into D&D as a kid. And again, that tied in. Not really. It's not a board game. The one thing it doesn't have is this board. There's dice, and you can have figurines and maps. It's everything but the board, right? But I mean, basically, you make the board because it's you have a different map every time. But yeah, I think D&D for me is my favorite game of all time. And it ties in the whole reading and fantasy thing, and
that's really cool. Because the one thing that's common between board games and books is that there's new board games coming out every single day.
Yeah, and I'm not really into that many board games. I play some Monopoly with my kids, but just because that's what they like.
Monopoly,
yeah.
Okay.
But I don't really particularly care about that game. Yeah, no.
Cool, man. No problem. Okay, where can my audience find you?
So my consulting company is Anara, so anara.com. You can find my book on Kotlin if you're into programming on thekotlinbook.com. And I also have 2 books through Ray Wenderlich, and you can find some of my tutorials on raywenderlich.com. So there's an upcoming book. I can't really disclose the name of it, but it's an advanced Android book. And then there's another book that is a second edition of the Android Apprentice. So if you're thinking about getting to mobile development, I mean, that's a really good place to start.
Fantastic. Well, Fuad, thank you so much for your time, your insights into cycling, your stories, and the awesome hobbies and passions you have for so many awesome things. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you. And wow, the time flew by so fast, man.
Yes.
Dude, we got to go riding, man.
That's the one awesome thing about having conversations with friends. Time just flies.
But we need to get together and go do some riding.
We'll go riding. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode on Hacks and Hobbies. We absolutely appreciate your contribution. You can find additional notes on hacksandhobbies.com. Please share the podcast with your friends and tell them what you learned about our guest today.